What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, we're taking a look at the blank and double game week. So I'm going to go through what we already know, what we kind of know, and then what information we're waiting for and how that all ties into the type of transfers that we might want to make over the next few weeks. I'll also discuss chip strategy, so when to use the triple captain, and also when we might look to use things like the second wildcard, free hit, and of course the bench boost as well. Most of the information in this video has been taken from what Ben Krellin has put out on Twitter, so make sure you're following him if you're not already. I'll leave a link in the description below. Otherwise, give the video a like if you enjoy it, hit that subscribe button if you haven't done so already, and let's jump into it. So I won't spend too long on this because we kind of already know about them, but there are two mini double game weeks coming up in game weeks 22 and 23. So in double game week 22, Man United are going to play Crystal Palace at home and Leeds at home, and then Leeds have got Nottingham Forest away and Man United away. And then in double game week 23, Arsenal have also got two home fixtures, Brentford at home and Man City at home, and then Man City have got Aston Villa at home and Arsenal away. So just a few notes on this. I would probably use the triple captainship in one of those two double game weeks if I still had it. I think for me, the main player that I wanted to use it on this season was Haaland, and obviously in game week 23 he has got Arsenal away, which is very tricky. So if you wanted to wait until Man City have got better doubles later on in the season, you could do that, but there's also a chance that those double game weeks will be in a week where you want to use a different chip. So while you should absolutely try and get the most points from your triple captainship, it's also about getting the most points overall. So if you lose a few points now but gain a lot more in the future because you can use your bench boost or your wildcard or your free hit or whatever it might be, that is better than just saving the triple captainship because you don't like Arsenal away. Obviously, just to go back to it, you could also use it on a Man United player, Rashford or Fernandes. I think right now, just because of how good Arsenal have been this season, I would be tempted to use it on Rashford instead because of the two home fixtures, but it's close between the two. Either way, I would probably use it on either Rashford, Fernandes or Haaland, and then just use your other chips later on this season and not have to worry about fitting the triple captain in somewhere. You don't have to use it. There will be smaller double game weeks later on as well, like we've got in 22 and 23, but you might not want to triple captain those players. As you'll see later on, for example, Liverpool might get a double game week in game weeks 25, but I don't think anyone at this point in time wants to triple captain someone like Salah. So there might be times where Kane has a better double game week or something like that. It depends whether you value having the chip and getting more information later, or using it now and being a little bit more flexible with the rest of your chips. I think I would probably use it now. And then the other thing I would say, based on, you know, the double for Arsenal, is triple Arsenal is really non-negotiable for me. I even think to a certain point, if you've got to use a lot of transfers to get Man United players in then back out and you're not tripled up on Arsenal, Arsenal is probably the priority because they got the double game week in 23, but they'll also play, as we'll see in a minute, in blank game weeks 25 and 28, and they're just great and they're really cheap as well. No matter which, like, even if you want to go for Saka, I still think for 8.1 million he's extremely cheap compared to other players. So going for triple Arsenal is just non-negotiable, and for triple captain I would probably use it in one of those 2 weeks. So at the time of recording, the Carabao Cup semi-final second legs haven't yet been played, but it does look likely that both Man United and Newcastle United will get through to the Carabao Cup final. If that happens, these four teams will blank in game week 25 and they won't have a fixture. So Man United, who a lot of us are looking to double or even triple up on in game week 22. Brentford as well. Interestingly, I think Ben Mee went up in price last night, so people are bringing him in. A lot of people went for Tony recently. They might not be playing in game week 25. Newcastle United, there's a lot of teams out there with Trippier and Botman, possibly even Almiron as well. And then, of course, Brighton, who are doing really well right now, got some nice fixtures in the short term. People are looking at Matoma, March, Estepinian and Dunk as well, but they may not play in game week 25. That's what's looking likely right now. The only thing I would say is we will know the Carabao Cup results before the game week 22 deadline. So if Nottingham Forest end up overturning that 3-goal advantage that Man United have, or Southampton beat Newcastle and get through to the final, this will slightly change, but this is what it's looking like right now. So I just wanted to show you these tweets from Ben that mention a possibility, definitely not a guarantee, of double game weeks in game weeks 25 and then 26 or 27. These would be mini double game weeks like we have in 22 and 23. So in the first tweet, he's talking about blank game week 25 and then goes on to say, I think there's a chance that Arsenal and Everton and or Liverpool and Wolves could double in game week 25. That's not probably going to change our strategy too much, but it's just something to think about. So Arsenal are already looking really really good to triple up on. You already know that. I've mentioned it a lot of times. Everton is probably not a big concern. I can't think of many Everton players that a lot of us have. Possibly just Patterson on the bench, but he's injured, so we need him to be fit and first choice. So he's not really worth worrying about. Liverpool and Wolves is more interesting. There's people out there with Salah, maybe some with Nunez, possibly some of you with Trent. And for Wolves, Bueno is in a lot of squads because he's so cheap. And it might just change how you think about your transfers. And it doesn't mean that you have to now keep them in case they double. But for me, for example, in Game Week 23, I've got the possibility of doing Salah to De Bruyne, but I also have Fernandes, who's going to blank in Game Week 25. Whereas with Salah, he's not going to blank in 25 and may double. So instead of doing Salah to De Bruyne, I might end up doing Fernandes to Mahrez instead. And likewise with Nunez, you might be able to get rid of him right now for a better upgrade. But if there's a different upgrade you can make somewhere else in your team to start planning for these blanks and doubles, and you can just keep Nunez with the outside chance of getting a double, that might be worth doing. Obviously, you don't want to, you know, lose loads of points now to possibly gain some later, but that's how I'll be thinking about possible transfers. And in the second tweet, I think he's talking about Brighton having a fixture in Game Week 25. I could be wrong, but goes on to say that I can see Brighton playing one of their postponements in Game Weeks 26 and 27. Now, Brighton are a bit frustrating because they got lots of good value players. They're playing really well right now, and they've got good fixtures, but they are going to blank in 25, and sometimes you just have those frustrating points in FPL where you just feel like you can't buy a player even though they've got good fixtures. So obviously it's all team dependent. You can decide what you want to do. But I'm looking at my team thinking I've got triple Man United and Trippier and Greenwood and Patterson, 6 players to deal with for Game Week 25 already. I can't then add another Brighton player, but I might work out a few transfers where I possibly bring in a Brighton defender or even an attacker for Game Weeks 26 or 27 if they double, right? And another way you could look at it is, let's say you've got Botman and Estepinian in your team, just as an example, and you need to get rid of one of them in Game Weeks 25 to get out a full 11. You might prioritise getting rid of Botman instead of Estepinian because he may double, even though it's not guaranteed. So it's just a few things to think about. I thought it was worth mentioning. So last night, the FA Cup 5th round draw was made, and that's going to help us a little bit with Game Week 28. So this is an image that I took off Ben's Twitter account. Essentially, any Premier League side that wins their 5th round tie will get through to the FA Cup quarterfinals, and they will blank in Game Week 28, and so will whoever they were scheduled to play that week in the league, right? And as you can see from the draw, lots of Premier League sides have avoided having to play other Premier League sides, so therefore they will be odds on to win their match and get through and then blank in 28. Now, it doesn't always work like that, of course. There can be cup upsets, but that is how the draw has been made. Just a couple of notes. Man United versus West Ham or Derby. This image was made before that game was played. West Ham have beaten Derby, so Man United will play West Ham. That's an all Premier League tie. And Fulham have got to replay Sunderland from the 4th round, and if they win that, they would then play Leeds, and that would be an all Premier League tie as well. So Ben's also put together this image, which shows the percentage chance of a fixture being off. So Brighton versus Man United, for example, is very likely to be off because even if we go back here and West Ham beat Man United, Brighton have got to play Stoke and they will be odds on to win that game. So if Man United lose but Brighton win, that game will be a blank for both sides. Now, the interesting thing here is any team with a green background is out of the FA Cup. So Arsenal versus Palace, Villa versus Bournemouth, Chelsea versus Everton, and Nottingham Forest versus Newcastle. Those fixtures will definitely be on. Brentford, Wolves and Liverpool are also out of the FA Cup, but their opponents aren't. So if we go back to this draw, Leicester have got, I think that's Blackburn or Birmingham. If Leicester were to win that game game would be off, and obviously Brentford would blank as well. The interesting thing is if Fulham beat Sunderland, they will play Leeds in the 5th round. Only one of them can go through. So one of Wolves versus Leeds or Liverpool versus Fulham will definitely be on. And there is a chance that both fixtures are on if Sunderland beat Fulham and then they go on to beat Leeds. But obviously that is very unlikely. So just a few notes for this, because I know it can get a little bit complicated. It sometimes gets complicated trying to read it out myself. But like I said, one of these fixtures will go ahead. Wolves versus Leeds and Liverpool versus Fulham. So if you have players from one of those fixtures already, you could hedge your bets by adding one from the other one. So for my team, for example, I've already got Mitrovic and Salah, and I don't really have plans right now to sell them. them. So if I wanted to, I could get in a Leeds player like Gnonto is kind of right at the top of my list for how my squad is set up. And he would have a double this week. He would play in game week 25, and there's a chance that he would also play in 28. And if he doesn't, it means the other fixture is going to go ahead for sure, Liverpool versus Fulham. It is possible that both of those fixtures could go ahead, like I said, but it involves Sunderland beating 2 Premier League sides in a row. But we'll see what happens. Aston Villa will play in both blank game weeks 25 and 28. So for me, for example, I'm considering whether to go for Leon Bailey instead of Andreas Pereira if I switch to a 3-4-3, because he'll definitely play twice. I also think an Aston Villa defender like Tyrone Mings could be an option. Maybe Alex Moreno on the left side as well. Both of those players could be options to bring in, knowing that when you need them, they're going to have fixtures. It's just something to think about. People are going to ask whether or not to free hit in game week 28. For most people, it's probably going to be better to use it later on. I'll come on to that in a minute. But if you think about it, which fixtures are going to definitely be on? You could easily set up, so triple Arsenal, which I've spoken about a lot, so that's 3 players. Maybe 1 Villa defender, that's 4. 1 of Bailey or Andreas, you could have, that's 5. Trippier, because Newcastle are definitely going to play, and no one's dropping him anytime soon. And then a lot of you have got Kepa as well for Chelsea, and they are definitely playing in 28. That's already 7 players before you even think about anyone else. And then, like I said, one of those 2 fixtures at the top would be on. If that's Liverpool versus Fulham, then you've got the likes of Salah, the likes of Nunez, the likes of Mitrovic, like of Andreas Pereira. It's going to be quite easy to get to 11 players, I think, for most squads, and therefore that free hit is probably better used later on, which we'll come on to in a sec. So I just wanted to talk about the other blank and double game weeks and how that might fit in with chip strategy. So game week 32 is going to be a blank game week. There shouldn't be as many fixtures off as there are in game week 28. And you're probably thinking to yourself, well, why would I not use the free hit in 28? But 32 is probably going to be harder to navigate because it's surrounded by other double game weeks. So that's when you're going to want to use your chips a little bit more, as I'll show you in a second. And then the big double game weeks are likely to be in game weeks 29, 34, and 37. So in terms of chip strategy, right, of course, this is team dependent and it might change, but these are probably the main 2 strategies that a lot of people are going to use. So one is to free hit in double game week 29. That would allow you to delay the wild card a little bit later. So you would free hit in double game week 29. You would just get through game week 28 with transfers, as we just spoken about. You would dead end your team into blank game week 32. So what that means is you're only making transfers to get yourself through game weeks 30, 31, 32, even if that means taking out players that are good in the long term, just so you can get a full 11 out in 32. You then wildcard in 33 to get your team kind of reset for the end of the season, given that you've just kind of dead-ended it into 32. And then you would bench boost in one of the big doubles in 34 or 37, depending on how the fixtures get done, which we won't find out until later on. The other option is to wildcard in double game week 29, then free hit in 32, so cover yourself for the blank there, because obviously you can't then wildcard again later on. So you've used it in 29, you free hit in 32, then you bench boost in 34 or 37. Now, which strategy you go for is going to depend a lot on how the fixtures fall and stuff like that. Right now, I would say I prefer the first option because you get to wildcard closer to the double game weeks and just to kind of get yourself through the end of the season. With the second option, the gap between the double for the wild card and then using your bench boost is a little bit longer, but it may be that that works out better. So I wouldn't worry about that too much right now, but I'd say that at this point is what the main 2 strategies will probably look like. This is why I wouldn't worry too much about your chip strategy just yet. So I actually sent a message to Ben to ask him if he could look over the notes I made for this video, just to make sure I hadn't made a massive mistake. He kindly did, and then he sent me this reply. Now, he said Game Week 33 a couple of times, but he meant Game Week 32 instead. So chip strategy is correct. Game Week 32 will be a nightmare if Southampton, Spurs, Man United and Man City reach the semi-finals. That's for the FA Cup, of course. It would then mean blanks for Arsenal, Newcastle, Spurs, Man City, Brighton, Man United, Chelsea and Southampton. So a lot of the teams there are what make up our FPL squads. So that would be a nightmare, and that is why I wouldn't get set in stone about exactly where you're going to use the free hit. I just would not use it in Game Week 28 unless you absolutely had to. He then said we'll get a better idea of whether we might need to free hit in 32 after the FA Cup draw in Game Week 26. You can kind of ignore what I said because I haven't really added much to the conversation. He said said, so in Game Week 26, you can either lean towards Wildcard 29 and Free Hit 32, or Free Hit 29 and Wildcard 33. So like I said, you don't need to worry about it right now. So other strategies may well become viable down the line. So either of those two chip strategies might not be the one that any of us decide to do based on, you know, what fixtures get put where. For now, the best thing you can do, if possible, is use the minimum amount of transfers. So if you can roll a transfer, ideal, to maximise the current double game weeks, or at least to start planning for some of the blanks. So this week for me, I may just use one transfer and roll, or I might use two, but that will be with one eye on preparing for the blanks at the same time. Like I said, rolling a transfer where possible would be helpful, and don't stress too much because this could change very quickly. So hopefully that video was useful. If it was, give it a like, hit that subscribe button, make sure to follow Ben if you're not already. I'll put a link to his Twitter account in the description below. Otherwise, I'll catch you again tomorrow.